The breaking news is that President Trump is in Washington, D.C. He is meeting with President Biden, and an occurrence for the press just happened. This is not a very long clip, but this is all they provided.
Well, Mr. President-elect and former President,
thank you.
Donald, congratulations.
Thank you.
And looking forward to having like we said, smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So
good.
Welcome
Thank you
back.
very much. And thank you very much. And politics is tough, and it's in many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate it very much. A transition that's so smooth, it'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Jim.
You're welcome.
Chaos kind of broke out as they tried to ask some questions, but that was it. President Biden, again, meeting, having a very cordial conversation with President Trump. All smiles, by the way, ear to ear. I think we can't discount that. There's been a lot of talk of whether Biden has been, secretly a little bitter, obviously, on all the things that went down. There's also some reports that the pick of Harris, when he endorsed Harris, that was not something that Pelosi and that team had planned on, that they had planned on a open primary. And then 30 minutes after his announcement, he dropped that tweet that said, hey, or X post said, hey, I'm endorsing Harris. And apparently that caused a lot of chaos. That's all just reports. No one's confirmed that. But you can kind of feel that tone. There is the conversation, though, of it being a smooth transition. I feel like each time they say that is a bit of a dig. Obviously, we know what happened in 2020, 2021. Maybe not the smoothest of transition. But I guess that will be determining whether you see President Biden showing up to the inauguration. What is that going to look like? And it should be an interesting couple months.
What you did see there was a Joe Biden that looks unburdened by what has been, to borrow a phrase from the current vice president. He had smiles. He seemed very relaxed, and I think he's probably just ready for this all to be over.
There's breaking news right now, which is that John Thune, Senator Thune, has won the role to be the Senate leader. So that is just breaking right now. I know I've seen a lot of people asking what that was happening right now. Again, if you're watching live, that is just breaking as this very moment as we're on the air.
And a lot of people in MAGA world aren't necessarily as excited about that. Now, there's many ways to look at this. There was John Cornyn, there was Senator Thune, and then there was Senator Scott that were wanting to take this role. Kind of the coalescing behind Senator Scott was happening from the more MAGA world leaning senators and supporters of that
group, kind of,
And what we're seeing now is that the first vote that did take place, they have to do it until they get a majority of the senators, and then if you are the third, when the lower candidates drop off and they do more rounds. First vote was John Thune. Senator Thune got 23, Senator Cornyn got 15, and Senator Scott got 13. So Senator Scott got the least amount of senators. He dropped off the ballot, and then they did the round again, where Senator Thune did end up winning by 29 to 24. So he got, it looks like the majority of the senators, but some of those Scott votes went to John Cornyn, which I'm actually more surprised about. I think between the two, that Senator Thune at least is more friendly towards the MAGA side than maybe Senator Cornyn would have been. But we now have a new leader. The Senate gets to pick their leader. That is their rules. It's not a constitutional position. It is based up of the party that's in the majority, makes their decisions and their rules about how they will go forward as a caucus. So now what the senators in the Senate need to hold their new leader to account is that there was a mandate from the American people. We saw the Senate being taken back. Potentially it looks at maybe gains a few seats in the House as compared to where the House is right now. And the president winning both the popular vote. There's a lot of people out there saying, he's probably not going to win it because California still has 20% out. Every time ballots come in, he's still maintaining a 2% a gain over Harris in the popular vote. So he's still up 3.2 million votes. It's not going to flip. There's a mandate wanting the agenda of President Trump to go forward. So no matter who the Senate Majority Leader is, he needs to understand that. And I think the senators within that caucus need to hold him accountable as their leader and say, we know you control the docket, we know you control the calendar, but we need to get things done. We need to get these appointments through very quickly. We need to get legislation. And when budget reconciliation happens, that's how a lot of moves will happen because of the funding of government. When you take that takes the filibuster out of it. So the Senate Democrats can't block it. That leader needs to be willing and courageous enough to move forward with these reconciliation packages that will deliver what the American people voted them into office to go do.
I know some of you've heard. You have Susie Wiles, who's the chief of staff,
right?
Who we knew that, again, does not need Senate confirmation. You have Tom Homan, does not need Senate confirmation as the border czar, essentially.
Right.
Elise Stefanik, who has been a friend of us and a friend of our show for a long time, as the UN ambassador. You've heard all these before. Zeldin, who almost flipped New York, is an environmental protection agency. We have Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. So again, that's a name coming out. That's a name that most of our audience is familiar with, who we've seen her running ads nationwide forever. So that one, I don't know if it was a surprise.
It was a surprise, not that she got a position in the. She was a short runner for vice president.
Yeah.
But Department of Homeland Security was the surprise. It was not. I mean, she has a state that has a very rich energy economy. I could have seen something like Department of Energy or something like that for her, and it made a little bit more sense on paper. Yeah. But President Trump, he's working through these. He's picking who he thinks is going to be best for the job.
Maybe the big one, which is not Senate confirmation. This is the new Department of Government Efficiency, or as they call it, DOGE, which is Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. This is a pretty interesting one. We all expected there to be something. There was rumors of DOGE becoming a department. My son, who is a big Elon fan due to all his tech movements and because of DOGE and all the things he's done, when I sent this to him, the announcement from President Trump, I just got a text back that just said, oh my goodness, because the fact that he created a department that I think is really needed and is going to be very fun to follow, because they are not only going to take on sort of government waste, they said they're actually going to create a leaderboard where you'll be able to log on and see where the waste is happening the most. And then they will then be able to advise where things should be defunded, essentially.
And a lot of people, especially if you are watching Twitter and seeing the left, they're freaking out about this. How can he do this? This seems unconstitutional to create a new department. This effectively is a blue ribbon commission, which has a long history in our country, probably the most famous of which was the Warren Commission, which brought in experts to analyze the failures of the government in the JFK assassination. But blue ribbon commissions are not rare, really, in the government. It's where you bring in outside experts and they give recommendations to the government, and then it still is up to the government to then go and implement those. He gave them a timeline, basically an 18-month timeline, to really get in there, find this stuff, and so that tool I mentioned earlier, the reconciliation package, that's really where they'll be able to get rid of a lot of these things, is in the funding of the government, cutting these things out, and it doesn't need a 60-vote threshold in the Senate to get through. So with the Republican majority there, if they stick with it and follow through with the agenda that President Trump was putting forward, we could see a lot of these big cuts happening.